all my life. I chased a father's approval I was never meant to earn until the night I handed him a box that ended our silence and began my legacy. Mia Carter, 34, stood in front of the hotel bathroom mirror, her lips practicing a speech she wasn't even sure she wanted to give. The silver ribbon on the navy blue gift box behind her glinted under the light, a quiet reminder of the decision she'd made. It was small, symbolic, final, just like the words she rehearsed. But even as she stared into her own eyes, lined with quiet defiance and a hint of vulnerability, the past whispered loudly in her ears. She remembered the moment she fell in love with the stars. 11 years old, sitting on the rooftop of the Carter house with a dog-eared astronomy book and a pair of binoculars, watching the moon as though it might wink back. She had felt infinite then, powerful, but that feeling never lasted long inside the Carter household. In Austin, Texas, her father Daniel Carter's word was the law. The Carter family lived in a polished brick fortress where accolades replaced affection and achievements substituted for love. Her brothers, Matthew and Josh, fit neatly into that world. Football, uniforms, army drills, handshakes with eye contact. Her father's dreams incarnate. Mia was the misfit. Quiet, imaginative, passionate about things that lived light years away. She tried to show him through projects, ribbons, scholarships, but Daniel Carter's gaze never stayed on her for long. Even when she won district-level science fairs or graduated magna cum laude from the University of Michigan, he remained distant. A text, a brief nod. Always polite, never proud. She had tried anyway. When she got the invitation to his retirement gala, she wanted to decline. Every instinct told her not to go. But the hurt child inside her wasn't done yet. That part still hoped for something: acknowledgement, maybe even affection. Not as the family disappointment, but as someone who mattered. The gala at the Hilton was everything she expected. Impeccably arranged. Emotionally sterile. Guests sipped champagne as a slideshow chronicled Daniel Carter's ascent from junior draftsman to aerospace CEO. Not a single photo showed the family. No birthdays, no weddings, just power poses and project launches. Mia arrived early, scanning the crowd. Her mother offered a small, supportive wave from across the ballroom. Her brothers greeted her like a distant colleague, all tight smiles and backhanded compliments. The moment they walked away, her presence already forgotten, she realized she was back in a familiar orbiting scene. Then the lights dimmed. The MC welcomed Daniel Carter with applause that echoed like thunder through the ballroom. Mia's breath caught as he stepped onto the stage, tall and composed, wearing a smile honed over decades of leadership. The applause quieted, and then came the words. "My sons, Matthew and Josh," he said, voice swelling, "have always made me proud. They represent the Carter name with strength and honor." The room stood for them. Daniel paused, his smile faltering only slightly. Not every child has what it takes. And that's okay. Not everyone is cut from the same cloth. The words hit like a blade. He didn't need to say her name. Everyone knew. Polite laughter fluttered through the room. Mia rose from her chair. She walked, not rushed, not flustered, straight to the stage's edge, gift box in hand. "From your biggest failure," she said, calm and clear, placing the box gently in his hand. "Enjoy your retirement." Gasps followed her out of the ballroom, but not a single part of her broke in the garage. Seated in the quiet cocoon of her Tesla, her phone buzzed repeatedly. Messages from her mother, from Sophia, from Josh. She ignored them all. Instead, she pictured her father opening that gift, a photograph. She and Daniel were at the science fair. She had just won first place. His arm was around her shoulder, a genuine smile. A moment of pride, long forgotten. Under the photo, a note: "This was the last time you looked at me like I mattered. I spent 20 years chasing that version of you. I'm done now." It wasn't vengeance. It was true. A fragment of a childhood reclaimed. Later, her phone flashed with a text from her father. "We need to talk by nightfall." She found herself walking into her childhood home. Familiar scents greeted her: lemon polish, pinewood. Her father sat in the den, the photo frame on the table beside him. "I don't remember that day," he said. "Of course you don't," Mia replied. "It was important to me. I pushed you," he said quietly, "because I saw something in you." "No," Mia said, "you pushed me away." He looked at her, older than she remembered. Vulnerable. Even. "You reminded me of your grandfather. He never approved of me either." And there it was. Generations of unresolved hurt, inherited like a curse. "You were never a failure, Mia." He said, "I just didn't know how to raise a daughter like you." "No," she whispered. "You didn't try." He looked at her, really looked. "This time I saw you." It wasn't an apology. Not entirely. But it was the start of something raw, imperfect, real, and for the first time in her life, Mia Carter felt like the author of her own story. I spent my whole life trying to earn something he was never equipped to give, and that wasn't my failure. It was his. 2 weeks passed before I fully realized the weight I'd been carrying was gone. Not lessened, not temporarily lifted, gone. It didn't leave with a dramatic scream or some grand confrontation. It left quietly, like a tenant who'd been squatting in the corners of my soul for too long and finally packed up in the middle of the night. The need for approval. The ache for acknowledgement. The fantasy that one day, my father would look at me and say, "You're enough." He wouldn't, and somehow that truth no longer crushed me. It freed me. I flew back to Los Angeles on a Sunday morning. The plane coasted over sun-warmed mountains and glittering coastlines, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was escaping something. I was simply going home. Back to a life I had built with my own 2 hands. No shortcuts. No family name carries me, just hard work, long hours, and the belief that I could turn pain into propulsion. JPL welcomed me back like I hadn't just detonated decades of personal history. The lab was busy prepping for a major project, the launch of a new satellite array, to study deep space radiation patterns. I was overseeing the risk and systems analysis, and though the work was intense, it felt grounding. One afternoon, about 10 days after my return, my division head stopped by my office. "You're still good for the keynote next month?" she asked. I blinked. "The STEM Summit." She nodded. "You're the first female lead from JPL to be invited in a decade. And given your background, your story could mean a lot to the younger women in the audience." I knew what she meant by your background. She didn't mean the math or the science. She meant that I hadn't come from the expected places. That I'd had to navigate male-dominated spaces without a cheerleader in my corner. That I'd succeeded despite not because of my family. "I'm in," I said. Absolutely. That night, I sat on my apartment balcony, overlooking the city lights, and opened my laptop. The first line of the speech came instantly. Sometimes the greatest fuel for a rocket isn't fire, it's rejection. I told the truth about growing up in a house where being a daughter meant being doubted. About how brilliance can be ignored if it doesn't wear the right name or play by the right rules. About how painful it is to be invisible in your own family and how powerful it is when you finally stop waiting to be seen. And I ended it with a message I wish someone had told me at 16 or 22 or even 30. You are not obligated to prove yourself to people who refuse to see you. Some legacies are worth breaking. And sometimes the most revolutionary thing you can do is walk away, not in anger, but in clarity. The video of that speech would later go viral. But that wasn't the point. The point was, I meant every word. My brothers never reached out, not after the party, not after the fallout. And honestly, I didn't expect them to. For Matthew and Josh, family loyalty meant obedience, silence, and appearances. And I had broken that pact. I had exposed the fault lines that they'd spent their lives pretending didn't exist. It hurt, in a quiet way. The kind of ache you get when you realize your siblings were never truly your allies, just co-stars in a script written by someone else. And yet, I didn't feel alone. Because for the first time in years, I wasn't silencing myself to stay in someone else's comfort zone. I had stopped chasing people who only saw me as a problem to manage. My mother called a few times. Our conversations were cautious, like trying to cross a river on thin ice, but something about them felt different, softer, perhaps even remorseful. One afternoon, she whispered into the phone, "I should have done more. I should have stepped in." I closed my eyes, letting the words sink into a place I hadn't known needed healing. "I know," I replied. "But I also know you loved me. Even if you couldn't always show it in front of him." A long pause, then a soft sigh. "I always loved you. I was just afraid." Afraid. Of what? Of rocking the boat. Of being dismissed like me. Of losing what little peace there was. Maybe all of it. Still, those calls became a small thread. Not a full repair, but something. And sometimes that's enough. Healing rarely looks like movie endings. It looks like quiet phone calls and shaky first steps. Then one day, a small envelope arrived in my mailbox. No return address. I almost tossed it, but something about the handwriting stopped me. Inside was the photo I had given my father. On the back, in the rigid, Precise lettering, I knew by heart. He had written, "I didn't forget this day. I just tried to because it scared me how much I loved that version of you. You deserved more than I gave. I'm sorry." No signature. Number, preamble, just that. I read it 3 times before placing it in the same drawer where I used to store every disappointing birthday card he'd ever sent. That drawer wasn't heavy anymore. It didn't sting, it was filled with perspective. Because, sometimes the apology doesn't come the way you hoped, and sometimes, it doesn't come until after you've stopped needing it. That's what healing is. Not a dramatic purge. Not a tearful climax. Just a shift. Quiet, powerful. Real. Around that time, my speech from the STEM Summit began circulating. Online, it found its way into university forums, women in tech groups, and leadership pages. A journalist reached out wanting to profile my story, not just the viral moment, but what it meant to grow up invisible and still build a life of worth. At first, I hesitated. Did I want to be the face of that pain? To turn my history into a headline? But then I thought of all the girls who had emailed me. Girls who said they saw themselves in my words. Girls who said they cried watching me hand that box to my father, and I said yes. The article was titled, "The Failure Who Made It." It opened with the gala. I walked to the stage, placed the box, and turned away. But the rest of it focused on what came after, the science, the grit, the quiet victories, and the choice to define myself on my terms. One paragraph stayed with me. Mia Carter didn't burn bridges. She simply stopped building them where they were never meant to lead. That sentence carved itself into my bones. Because for years, I believed boundaries were betrayals. That walking away from family expectations was a form of selfishness. But now I understood. Boundaries aren't walls, they're doors. You walk through, you close what needs closing. And you don't apologize for protecting your peace. A week after the article ran, I got a message from someone I hadn't thought of in years. Alina Carter, my cousin, my father's sister's daughter. We had barely known each other growing up. Our families kept things formal. Distant, her message read, "I read your story. It made me cry. You probably don't know this, but my dad treated me the same way. Always said boys were the future. Girls were decorations. I wish I'd had your courage. Thank you for showing me it's not too late to rewrite the story." I stared at her words for a long time before typing back. It's never too late to stop shrinking. That's what they don't tell you. You don't heal all at once. It's not a light switch. It's a dimmer. Some days are bright. Some are shadowed, but the light builds. Bit by bit. 3 months had passed since my father's retirement gala. 3 months since the silence began. My story, the one I thought would disappear into the void, had found its way into thousands of inboxes, lecture halls, and social feeds. The STEM Summit speech had gone viral, shared by women in engineering, first-gen college students, and even career coaches. A few weeks later, a journalist reached out to write a profile. Not just about the speech but about the girl behind the spotlight who had grown up in the shadow. At first, I hesitated. I wasn't used to being seen, not like this. But then I realized, this story wasn't just mine anymore. It belonged to every daughter who was told she wasn't enough. Every sister was left out of the photo. Every woman who learned to clap for herself in a room that never noticed she was there. So I said yes. The article was titled "The Failure Who Made It." It opened with a single, haunting image, me handing the navy blue box to my father on stage. But what mattered more was what came after. My work at JPL. My words at the summit. My choice to stop auditioning for a role in a family play I had never auditioned for. One paragraph stood out. Mia Carter didn't burn bridges. She simply stopped building them where they were never meant to lead. That line felt like my spine, strong, quiet, and earned. After the article ran, I received a message from a name I didn't immediately recognize. Alina Carter, my cousin, my father's sister's daughter. We hadn't spoken in years. Barely knew each other. Her message read, "I read your story. It made me cry. My dad was the same. The said girls were background noise. I wish I'd had your courage. Thank you for showing me it's not too late to rewrite the ending." I replied with a single line. It's never too late to stop shrinking. That's the thing no one tells you about healing. It's not a light switch, it's a dimmer. Some days, you glow. Some days, the shadows win. But each day, the light builds. I hadn't spoken to my father since that envelope, the anonymous one with the photo I had given him. No return address. Just a line on the back of the photograph. I didn't forget this day. I tried to, Because it scared me how much I loved that version of you. You deserved more than I gave. I'm sorry, no signature. No fanfare. Just raw truth in sharp block letters. I folded the photo and tucked it into a drawer where I once stored every disappointing birthday card he ever gave me. The drawer used to hurt. Now it grounded me. Not pain perspective, because sometimes the apology comes late. Sometimes it doesn't come the way you need it. And sometimes it only arrives after you've stopped waiting. I returned to Austin months later, but not for my parents. I was invited to speak on a panel at UT for aspiring engineers. The lecture hall was packed with young women, immigrants, first-gen scholars, and dreamers with scraped knees and tenacity in their eyes. I told them the truth. That sometimes your biggest obstacle, where's your last name? That you're not a failure for being different, you're a survivor, and that proving others wrong is powerful, but proving yourself right, that's freedom. Afterward, a 19-year-old girl came up to me. Her voice barely above a whisper. She asked, "How did you know when it was time to stop trying to win his approval?" I smiled. "I didn't," I said. "I just woke up one day and realized, I already had mine." The next big project at JPL was unlike anything I'd worked on before. It was ambitious, risky, groundbreaking. A new satellite mission is designed to gather data on a newly discovered exoplanet with conditions eerily similar to Earth. I was chosen to lead it. 6 months earlier, I might have second-guessed my right to be there. I might have waited for someone to tell me I deserved the chair I sat in. Not anymore. Leadership didn't feel like a reward, it felt like a responsibility. To the girls watching now. During those long nights in the lab, I often thought about how easy it is to internalize someone else's silence as a reflection of your worth. But that silence was never mine to carry, and I no longer gave it power. In the fall, JPL hosted an interagency symposium, and I was invited to speak again. The theme, legacy. I stood on stage under the soft halo of lights and told a new story. Not one about pain, but about power. Not about absence, but about arrival. I used to believe legacy was something inherited, I told them, a family name, a title, a business card. But legacy is what we build when no one is watching. It's the wake we leave behind, not for applause, but for direction. The crowd stood, some clapped, some cried, some simply nodded. And in the back row, I spotted a familiar face, my mother. She didn't wave. She didn't call out, but her eyes were glassy, her smile quiet. And in that moment, I knew she had come alone. After the speech, we met in the atrium. She hugged me longer than she ever had. "He saw the article," she said softly. "He reads everything now. He said he's proud." My heart didn't race. It didn't ache. It just settled, calm and steady. "I know," I whispered. I didn't need him to say it. Not anymore. Because the truth was, I'd already built a life beyond his recognition. My legacy wasn't written in his words. It was etched in mine. Later that week, I flew to Geneva to accept an award from the Global Aerospace Alliance. On stage, holding the crystal plaque in my hands, I thought about that girl with the soda can space station, the one who launched dreams in silence. She would have been proud of me, and that was all that mattered. As the applause faded and the spotlight dimmed, I looked into the crowd and smiled. This wasn't the ending. This was the beginning, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't orbiting someone else's expectations. I was finally flying my course.